You were still small when you learned to watch the room before you spoke, to notice who was tired, who was distant, who might turn away. You sat with your feelings folded inward, doing what you could to stay unnoticed, to stay safe, to stay manageable. Somewhere in that quiet, you began carrying yourself as if needing less would make you easier to keep. If you recognize yourself in that way of moving through the world, it isn't random, and it isn't a flaw in who you are. The way you react now grew out of something you had to adapt to long before you had words for it. What that absence quietly shaped inside you is still unfolding today. And if this feels familiar, you might want to stay with me as we begin to look at it. There is a moment after the opening feeling lands where something quieter begins to surface. Not a dramatic realization, more like recognition, a sense that what you felt wasn't random, or a personal flaw, or something you invented in your head. Many people carry this same pattern without knowing it has a name. Not because it needs a label to be valid, but because it didn't start with you. It started much earlier, when your nervous system was still learning what love was supposed to feel like. When a child grows up without feeling emotionally held, the absence doesn't register as something is missing. A child has no reference point for that. Instead, the body adapts. It learns through sensation, not logic. It learns what brings closeness and what brings distance. Over time, this shapes the nervous system, the sense of safety, and the way worth is experienced internally. Not through thoughts, but through the body's constant scanning of the world. One way to understand this is through what psychology sometimes calls an invisible wound. It isn't marked by obvious events. There may have been food, shelter, and routines. But emotionally, something essential wasn't mirrored back. The child learned that love was inconsistent, conditional, or simply unavailable. And because the nervous system's first job is survival, it didn't protest. It adapted. The invisible wound often shows up in very ordinary ways. You might feel uneasy when things are calm, like you're waiting for something to go wrong. Compliments don't land. Care feels suspicious. There's a sense of carrying something unnamed, a quiet ache that doesn't have a clear story attached to it. You can function. You can even succeed. But there's a background tension that never fully turns off. This began early. A child who isn't emotionally seen doesn't think, "I am unloved." The child thinks, "I must adjust." So attention turns outward. Sensitivity sharpens. The body becomes alert to tone, mood, and subtle shifts in others. This was adaptive. It kept you safe. It helped you anticipate disconnection before it happened. That sensitivity can become a strength. You read rooms well. You notice details others miss. You can be deeply attuned. But the cost is that your own internal signals get quieter. Needs feel vague. Desire feels risky. And rest can feel undeserved. The wound stays invisible because you learned not to look directly at it. And from there, the nervous system keeps shaping the rest. Over time, the nervous system itself becomes trained to expect loss, not consciously, somatically. It learns that closeness is temporary, that warmth can be withdrawn, that safety doesn't last. So even in stable relationships, there may be an underlying sense of bracing, a readiness for the moment things change. This can look like hypervigilance, checking messages twice, reading silence as rejection, feeling your body tense when someone pulls away, even briefly. It can also look like emotional parentification, where you learned early to manage other people's feelings instead of your own. You became the calm one, the responsible one, the one who didn't need much. That training started in childhood, when connection felt uncertain. The nervous system learned that staying alert was safer than relaxing, that monitoring others increased the chance of staying included. This was adaptive. It kept you connected. It reduced risk. It helped you belong in whatever way was possible at the time. And it does give you something. You're reliable. You're perceptive. People may depend on you emotionally, but the cost is chronic tension, a body that rarely settles, a feeling that love must be maintained through effort. Rest feels dangerous. Stillness feels unfamiliar. And underneath it all is fatigue that doesn't go away with sleep. As this pattern continues, identity often begins to form around earning love, not because you chose it, but because it was modeled as the only available path. Approval became the signal of safety. Achievement became a substitute for attunement. Being useful felt closer to being loved than simply existing. In adulthood, this might show up as hyper-independence, doing everything yourself, struggling to ask for help, feeling uncomfortable when others offer care. Or it may show up as people-pleasing, over-functioning, constantly adjusting yourself to be acceptable. The thought is quiet but persistent. If I do enough, I will be kept. This identity formed when the child realized that emotional needs weren't met freely. So the child adapted by becoming low maintenance, capable, impressive, or invisible. This was adaptive. It reduced disappointment. It increased predictability. It gave you some control in a situation where you had very little. There are real strengths here. You're competent. You're resilient. You can survive under pressure. But the cost is disconnection from your own worth. Love feels transactional. Self-value rises and falls with performance. And when you're not achieving or helping, there can be a hollow feeling, like something essential is missing. As the nervous system stays in this mode, emotional numbness can begin to appear, not because you don't feel, but because feeling fully once hurt too much. So sensations dull. Joy becomes muted. Sadness feels distant. You function, but life feels slightly behind glass. This numbness protected you when feeling deeply wasn't safe. It allowed you to keep going without collapsing. This was adaptive. It kept you moving forward. But the cost is that connection feels shallow, even when it isn't. You might crave closeness and feel disconnected at the same time. At some point, there is often a subtle shift. The very patterns that helped you survive begin to create friction. Hypervigilance becomes anxiety. Hyperindependence becomes isolation. Earning love becomes exhaustion. And yet, these patterns don't loosen easily because the body still believes they are necessary. This is where the slow rewiring of safety begins, not as an action plan, but as awareness. A recognition that the nervous system learned these responses for a reason, that nothing here is broken. These are not character flaws. They are survival strategies that outlive the environment they were built for. The body doesn't change through force. It changes through repeated experiences of safety, through moments where nothing is demanded, where presence doesn't have to be earned, where connection doesn't disappear when you rest. This happens gradually, quietly, often without you noticing at first. And slowly, something else becomes possible, a movement from survival toward belonging, not as a goal, but as a felt sense. Belonging that doesn't require performance. Connection that doesn't trigger vigilance. A self that doesn't need to disappear to be accepted. This doesn't erase the past. It doesn't invalidate what kept you alive. It simply allows the nervous system to learn something new at its own pace. That love can be steady. That safety can last. That you don't have to earn your place by abandoning yourself. And even recognizing this, even naming it, is already part of that shift. Maybe the hardest part wasn't what happened. It was growing up believing that what you felt didn't matter enough to be held. That quiet understanding settles in slowly, and it stays. Nothing you felt here means you were broken. You weren't too sensitive. You weren't weak. Your reactions made sense in a world where love felt uncertain, and they helped you endure what you had no control over. You don't have to keep carrying all of it the same way anymore. Not the tension, not the self-blame, not the feeling that you have to earn your place. There is room now for a little less weight, even if you don't know what to do with that space yet. Somewhere inside, there is still a child who learned to stay small, quiet, or useful to survive. That child doesn't need fixing. They need rest. They need to feel at home. They need to be held without being asked to prove anything. This kind of healing doesn't rush. It unfolds in its own time, often in ways you don't notice until much later. And if parts of this story felt familiar, there are other layers worth understanding too. In the next video, we'll explore the psychology of the hated child and what it does to someone when rejection isn't subtle, but overt. For now, it's enough to pause here. You're allowed to breathe.